Welcome into the Just Basketball Show for Thursday, July 20th. I'm Brendon Kleen. That over there is Chris Manning. We're back at you for a second episode this week. Want to remind everybody finding the show to hit follow or subscribe on your favorite podcast app. You can also search Just Basketball Fans on YouTube. Find our channel over there, pumping out clips, shorts, and full shows every single time we do one, twice a week for you. Whether you're on audio, video, we got you hooked up. We're also on social media, every single place that you could be. If you're there, we are there. Hit follow as well. And I want to tell everybody about Homage. Homage is an ultra comfortable specialty apparel company. Click the link below. They have a ton of licenses from the NBA to the WNBA to even your favorite cartoons and TV shows and national parks, everything in between. Perfect for any pop culture fan, sports fan, whatever event you have coming up. It's a perfect gift, all that good stuff. Click that link. Some of that money goes back to us. We have three big things to hit today. One is going to be an extension. Will they or won't they? And the other part of that is going to be a matchmaker for 2022. The guys that have not gotten the maxes, the guys that are still sticking around out there on the market who we want to guess their salaries and what their fate with their current team might be. We have some slop of the week, which is always great. And then we'll talk, to start things off, Chris, about NBA broadcast teams. We're nerds. We're sickos. We geek out on this stuff. We watch more basketball than probably anybody in our lives. And so this matters. TNT has it figured out. So we're not actually talking about them whatsoever today. It is all about ESPN. They had these layoffs. Jalen Rose gone from the studio show. Stephen A. Smith talking on the Bill Simmons podcast as if he will be off of that show as well. That's like half of the team of that show. And then over on the game side, of course, Jeff Van Gundy gone. Mark Jackson may be demoted based on some of these reports. And then you have Doris Burke, Doc Rivers, JJ Redick all in the mix. Let me just toss it to you there on your thoughts on the changes. We're going to do our dream teams for both the studio and the broadcast in a second. But what did you think of? Were you as fired up about these names being let go and all the craziness at ESPN as some Hoops fans were?
Well, my take would be on this, Brennan, something that I'm going to steal from, I think, what is my favorite podcast, the Press Box Pod from Brian Curtis and David Shoemaker. Brian has talked about ESPN being in its quote-unquote max player era, right? Like, it is very star-heavy. It is these big salaries and big personalities. I empathize with anyone getting laid off. You know, more of my empathy, I would say, goes towards some of the reporters laid off. You know, Nick Friedel who you don't see on TV a ton, was laid off. June Lee, a really great baseball reporter, was laid off. You know, there's behind-the-scenes people whose names we don't know were left. My empathy would go there. I don't get super over that. I think, you know, letting go Jeff Van Gundy was a mistake. I know, understand it's a write-off and it's a money thing. I'm sure that's where that comes from. But I've always found him to be excellent, you know. If I was going to be cheeky and I was building my game team, I would just be like, I'm bringing back Jeff Van Gundy. Like, if I wanted to be like real cheeky about it, because I think he's really good, and I think we'll miss him being there. And I empathize with anyone who, you know, loses their job, and especially when there's lots of people making lots of money that are still around and all that stuff. But I don't, you know, I'm not going to get super crazy, like, angry about this. I have, you know, that's not where my energy will go, I would say.
Yeah, I think the Van Gundy part of this is definitely the biggest bummer. It's just like he genuinely made you smarter. Like, you turn on a game, and if you're young or you maybe never watched the teams that you're watching, or you're not as plugged into the season as maybe some people are, like, he was the type of person that was just so comfortable consuming basketball in real time and spitting it back out at you. And, like, that's sort of what a basketball broadcaster should be able to do. Like, I don't know how you feel about this, but I always find it funny. There is certainly a level of prep that needs to happen, but I think in a job like this, the prep is just watch basketball. And if you're not even able to do that, then it's just sort of embarrassing. Like, some of these guys will get, like, there was the whole thing with Tony Romo last year on the NFL side of, like, he's not prepping the way he did when he first got the job. And, like, I think Jim Nantz had to go, like, with CBS executives and parachute into Tony Romo's home and, like, give him a pep talk to get the hard work back. But it's like, all you have to do is watch the games and be comfortable with basketball, and you should be able to digest and kind of describe what's up to the average fan. And there's just, that sounds so easy, but obviously it isn't. And there is just a very certain caliber of commentator who can really do that. And I value that because I mean, like you and I care about fans getting smarter about the game and getting the stories of the game and all that stuff. And if it's bad, it's noticeable, I guess is what I would say. The bad ones jump out.
Look, and I think there's something with Van Gundy, who obviously was a coach for a long time and all that stuff, that he could have, like, there are guys in this field, former players or coaches who parlay their careers into television work that kind of ride on those coattails, right? They're not curious in a lot of ways about where the game is going, what is happening in the game, how it is changing, the nuances of it. I think the best of what we get on television is when these guys are really curious and explaining things to us and using their knowledge, which is up here, to stay up to date and use their connections and use their insight to make the viewer smarter. Now, I would also say that, like, I would say that, Brennan, you and I are probably in our deep nerdy basketball fans are going to be looking for something different than your journalist fan. And I understand that sometimes, like, we're not going to always get exactly, I think, what you'd want in a purely basketball sense. You're going to get some of the journalists. And I think there's a need for that to some degree. But I think someone like Van Gundy kind of blends that of, like, this is a name you know. He explains things to you and can just be very casual with you, but also, like, is curious about what the game is and how it's evolving. Like, you don't have Van Gundy out here being like, when I would, like, yelling about what he did when he was with the Knicks in the 90s, right? Like, he understands that the game has changed and that the game has evolved, and it is a different league. And that, to me, is the through line of what makes so many of these people great.
Well, and there's that, like, kind of flex that media people can put out there of, like, I'm not on social media, or I don't pay attention to any of that. Athletes do it, coaches do it, whatever. Van Gundy, whether it was on the broadcast or on different podcasts, especially the Low Post, like, he kind of walked that walk. Like, it was almost like a refreshing thing to turn on his analysis, because it would just be so, he might touch on some stuff that was kind of commonly held wisdom, but most of what he was saying, you were just like, oh, he's not commenting on the general perception around this team or this player and, like, agreeing or disagreeing with X talking point. He is just giving it to you. And, like, that to me is really cool too. Like, we're going to talk about JJ Redick. Maybe he's in the mix potentially to jump all the way up to that. I don't know if I'm super thrilled with that idea in terms of, working your way up professionally, but he's a former athlete, does a great job. But JJ's online, like, heavy online, right? Like, you listen to his podcast, you look at him on Twitter, you see him on First Take. He knows all the stuff that's out there about every single thing about all of this. And he's kind of in real time, does he align with that or not, is sort of the through line. I like the idea. Maybe it's because Jeff Van Gundy's just an older guy, but to just be able to turn something on and be like, we're not having an MVP debate in the middle of this game broadcast necessarily. We're not having, like you said, threes versus whatever the 90s style was, little mini debate. He went off about the refs a lot, but I do think maybe that's a great place to jump to our ideal broadcasts now that we've laid out what matters to us. It seems somewhat similar. Let's start with the game because
actually, can we start with the studio? I think the studio.
It's going to be really hard with the studio to not just say the entire Inside the NBA. I know we're not pulling from TNT, but it's you're not beating that. That's what's always hard, and I think that's where ESPN struggles, or anybody else, Amazon who might get back in, or get in, or NBC getting back in, or anything like that. Sure. It's like, how do you compete with the GOAT broadcast or studio team?
Yeah, I have a little bit less to say about this. I'm not always even, like, watching the studio stuff, if I'm being honest. But I
do you watch Inside the NBA?
Yeah.
Okay.
Not all. Like, I watch at halftime, and then or like in between games, but I'm not, like, waiting post game, or, like, at that point I'm like, it's also East Coast, I'm going to bed. But, like, and it's also like you're not gonna. The reason I want to start with the studio is because there's a name that I want to, before we talk about who would host it, what other analysts would have on there. There's, like, a name that I just want to say because I think it is the most underrated person that we have in basketball media, and I don't understand why ESPN doesn't use him in more creative ways.
Okay, so
Can you guess who that is? I guess
I'm assuming you're going to say Zach Lowe.
No, it's not Zach Lowe.
Okay. Then go for it. Tell me. So a studio, like I think of it as 4 people.
Yeah. Same.
So,
I booked this for 4 people.
Great. So you go first.
My A1 analyst is Tim Legler.
Okay.
I think Tim Legler, every time I see him on television, every time I see him breaking down film, talking about concepts, talking about what is working or not working for a team in a given situation, I learn something. And he is concise, he is smart. This is, again, someone else who has stayed curious and up to date with the modern NBA despite playing in it a long time ago, right? Like, he has stayed current with it much better than a lot of former players who work at that network or other networks have. That is just like a fact. That guy is awesome. I don't understand why they don't have him and Lowe do like a show on the Lowe Post every week. I don't understand how he isn't like a more featured. Maybe he doesn't want to. I don't know what the deal is, but like that guy is so vastly underutilized to me in terms of making you smarter at home when you're watching him. To me, if you're building a studio show, that you will have some other personality, but if you want to, if the core around it and your differentiating factor is, I'm going to make this about really basketball stuff, Legler is in pen for me on this panel.
Okay, just do all 4. Keep going.
Okay, my other analyst, I'm going to have Chiney Ogwumike. I'm going to bring her when she's available. I want her on there. I want a diverse voice. I want a current WNBA player who I think when she I think can do really, really great work and offers a different perspective and can offer a current part of it. And then I want Richard Jefferson as the third analyst on there. He is funny. He is insightful when he's around the right people. He brings a bit of character to it, and you will get some moments out of having Richard Jefferson. He can be entertaining. Like, that guy is willing to say stuff while still being very insightful, right? Like, you can get something really good out of him. The host part of it, I'm flexible on this, but I'm going to say let's give it to Cassidy Hubbarth. Let's put her on there. I think she's really talented, really solid, can still give insight, can still do interviews and stuff, and you can have her with the energy matching Richard, matching Chiney, like having Legler on there. Like, I think that is like a good mix of all that stuff. Now, is what I would say to myself here is there's not like a Will Bond, a Stephen A., a Jalen Rose. I'm missing like the big personality that I think drives a lot of this. But I'm looking as like NFL Live and what makes that show really good, where there's not necessarily like a huge overwhelming personality, but you got your really smart people and a really quality host. And that's going to be the formula. It is Hubbarth, Ogwumike, Tim Legler, and Richard Jefferson. That is my studio team if I'm ESPN.
All right, I like it. I think we didn't establish ground rules of if this had to be only current ESPN employees. So I thought a little bit outside of that, but it's at least people we've seen do this job before. So I feel like I might have screwed you by not saying that, and then I'm going to go out of it.
I'm just assuming if they're not. And yes, they're all, like, you can look at this and say they're spending all this money on Pat McAfee while they're laying all these people off and said they would spend money. I'm not saying they wouldn't spend money, but I just kind of assume that they're maybe not going to spend money to bring someone new in at this current time. I thought about trying to
You went practical with it. You went like, if you're an
Yeah.
executive at ESPN right now, what would you be doing? I went more like, let me just completely start from scratch and go into fantasy land and whatever. But again, it's not like I'm saying like Larry Bird, who's never even done that job, just because it sounds cool. So let me go with mine. Analysts, I am going with Zach Lowe. I do think he's good on TV. I get why he doesn't do it more. He does a bunch of stuff for them. He writes. I wish he wrote more. Like, there's only so many things one person can do. I get that, whatever. I like it. I'm going to go with it. 2 players now. Did you ever watch like the original incarnation of The Jump on ESPN? When it first started with Rachel Nichols and Amin Al-Hassan, and then the 2 most common players at that point were Scottie Pippen, hit or miss, not my favorite, but then Tracy McGrady.
Mm-hmm. T-Mac was really good.
I don't know where he went. I don't know if he just doesn't want to do media anymore, if ESPN just moved on from him, but he's on my list here. Because my thinking is, part of what makes the Inside the NBA great is it's great players. Like, they're actual legendary players, and that's part of what's tough sometimes when you're trying to put a Kendrick Perkins or a Richard Jefferson or, whoever it is, it's not the same. Not that everything needs to be calling different guys out, but it's easier when you're watching great players go at it and you're able to knock them down a peg if you've kind of done that before. You know what I mean? I think it helps.
But to your point, this is why if I'm Bob Iger and the executives in the Disney Corporation that own ESPN, I am already calling Rich Paul and being like, "Hey, Draymond Green, how much money for you to just come right to us and not work for TNT when you retire?" Yeah. I'm like Draymond is the one that I'm carving out a path for him to be a multi-hyphenate superstar for me if I'm ESPN. I'm blowing the bag to make him part of my NBA coverage.
See, I'm not sure if ESPN has the stomach for what Draymond brings when it comes to, even if you don't own the podcast, he's going to say some things. They didn't even like that Paul Pierce spent time with, female entertainers. That was too much for the stockholders and whatnot. You know what I mean? It's
but he is just awesome at it, and he calls it like it is, and I suspect that Draymond is wired in a way that is not going to make him be someone that doesn't stay current with the game as he retires. I don't think that guy's wired to just settle into hot take zone. Like Brendan, there's a world where just to say names, Kendrick Perkins isn't what he is, and he's much more engaged and much more thoughtful about some stuff. I don't think Draymond. There's a chance Draymond is going to end up like that. He's just not.
All right. So in the spirit of my point about the celebrity legend, really, really star player status being helpful, my third and final analyst seat goes to Kevin Garnett. Another situation. He's doing a Showtime YouTube series / podcast thing. Really don't know why TNT didn't keep him around doing the show that he did, and it was on a couple editions of NBA 2K, and it seemed like people loved it, and then it just went away. I don't know if it was money or what. I think he's great. I think he tells it like it is, and he's pretty laid back. Similar type of issue maybe with the Draymond thing of couple overly colorful commentary from KG and things go off the deep end, but I think he's a professional and can figure it out. Last is the host. I'm going to go, again, not somebody who currently works at ESPN, but I'm going to go Taylor Rooks. She's never quite been a host of a show like that, but I think in terms of just, again, the level of honesty that I'm trying to get to and being able to just kind of play off of other people, she's my pick. I think she can kind of pass it to the athletes, incorporate Zach a little bit, get them disagreeing with each other. It feels like the right mix.
So I have her earmarked for the game team, in a way. Okay.
Oh, sideline?
Yeah.
All right.
Take us
there.
So game team. Here's my game team. I want to say that in retrospect and now doing this, there's a name that I'm not going to say that I think I kind of want to throw on TV, and maybe I have to, one of these guys, and there's a rotation. I want to put Doc Rivers is not going to be in my booth, but I would put him on TV.
All right.
I would want him. I didn't put him in my booth because I have a clear booth here. And you could talk me out of, there's a name in this booth that you've already said that I think I've really liked him when I've heard him on TV. Mm-hmm. But if you wanted to go a different direction, I would also, and you put him in the studio instead because he's willing to pick fights and stuff, I would be cool with that. If you wanted to swap him and Richard Jefferson out and have them rotate so because they both have other businesses and things, I would be okay with that's actually just what I'm going to do. JJ Redick is going to be on my studio thing, but him and Richard are going to rotate in so they don't have to work all the time because they both have other things they do. So my game team, it's Breen. Breen is the guy. Breen is, to me, my favorite big game NBA guy right now. Bang is an iconic call. There are just every finals call he's had the last couple of years, there's just at least one moment that is indelibly just stuck in your brain. I have him.
At least one of which is on our intro song. Yeah.
Yeah. Brendan, as someone from Cleveland, Ohio, blocked by James is just probably the last thing that'll cross my brain when I die. You know? When my brain is
that okay with you? Do you feel good about that?
We can't control ourselves. Hopefully I'm 105 and my brain's just recycling through things in my life and that'll just happen and that's cool.
No, there's worse stuff.
I'm good with.
No need to be ashamed. It's just a particular type of basketball insanity. But it's a great memory. It's not like it's a loss.
No, I mean, there's he's just someone who I think rises to the moment.
Yeah.
And then my booth, Doris Burke's in my booth. I think Doris Burke is also just underutilized. Also, someone incredibly curious, has great relationships with seemingly everybody.
Yeah.
I think she should have been in the booth already, if I'm being honest. And then we'll go Doc Rivers as the third. He has experience with it. He gives you the coach. I think I would prefer him to Mark Jackson at this point. I hope it's Doc sticks around and does this and isn't just using it. This is the caveat that Doc isn't going to be like what Sean Payton was on TV for a year and just not say anything interesting. He needs to be willing to kind of call it like it is a little bit if he's going to be in this position.
I don't remember Doc Rivers on TV. This is one of the things for me. I don't have specific memories of that, partially because I'm young, I guess.
Well, same thing for me. And I did a YouTube rabbit hole on this and found some compilations and stuff. He's pretty good. And he was on Simmons a couple weeks ago. I liked how he was pretty odd. He said some stuff about Harden that was just okay, you're willing to kind of call it is and understand that this might ruffle some feathers and you're cool with that. I think that's necessary for this kind of job. It's Breen and then Taylor Rooks. Taylor Rooks has the ability to get athletes to talk in a way that is incredibly rare now. And, I don't know, it's long form interviews a lot of the time and how that translates into sideline stuff I think would be kind of interesting. But I think that's just throw her the money, bring her show into your network to do these things, have her part of your countdown show with some interviews and stuff as well if you want. But I think you could create really good moments in a really, really hard job. That sideline job, Brendan, I don't think people always realize how hard it is to get anything interesting out of that. I would trust Taylor Rooks to have a pretty solid batting average of getting memorable moments for you out of that platform.
So with my courtside sideline reporter, Chris, I'm bringing a level of chaos, and it's Chris Haynes. Chris Haynes is basically operating his entire own broadcast / social experiment. I don't even know. As a Suns person, he has had multiple times on air where he has had to recontextualize or correct reports. He read a statement directly from Jay Crowder during his sit out on air. It's not even part of the basketball game. It is just all the stuff around the basketball game, and I absolutely love it. And then my booth is not too different from yours. I'm actually going to go with Doris Burke, who we talked about. I'm also going to go with Al Michaels. And you mentioned going down a rabbit hole on YouTube with Doc Rivers. If you go back and watch some of the old finals games and whatnot, the Al Michaels calling NBA experience was very fun. And I just love Al Michaels. I think the fact that he doesn't eat vegetables is legendary. I think the fact that he's 80 and still calling sports games is just great. So Al Michaels, Doris Burke, Chris Haynes. I don't know if any of those three people have ever met each other or want to, but they're going to be calling games in my dream world.
I just don't understand. I don't understand the Al Michaels thing, if I'm being honest with you. Legend in football. It's a very different sport. He's 78.
It's just chaos. That's you're missing the point here. No, I agree with you. I mean, I didn't want to pick Breen like you did. I think Kevin Harlan deserves an obvious shout out, but I'm just going.
I'm also
with the GOAT, Al Michaels.
Sure. I also would say if you wanted to get crazy and have a really good number two as your, I think, play-by-play, I'm also a really big Ron Ruocco guy. I would love Ruocco to get a push into getting bigger games, bigger opportunities other than random Friday night national TV games.
You know what the best Ruocco thing is? The way he says "and." And I've tweeted this so many times, but it's something will happen and it's the A is lowercase and then the N and the D are capitalized. It's and sure. You know what I mean? He's able to just in one word that's the most common word in the English language communicate so much.
Love it. I think my boost in my studio show is better.
I think my studio show is better than yours. I think you going first with the booth. There's only so many good options. I do think Stan Van Gundy's good. I'll throw that name out there too, but a little too much of a grouch for most people's liking. Speaking of grouches and trolls and people that aren't always beloved for what they say in public, let's go to Slop of the Week, which is courtesy of Joel quotes Troel Embiid as he so kindly reminded us after the uproar over some comments that he made at the Uninterrupted Film Festival in a sit-down staged interview with Maverick Carter, LeBron's entertainment partner and obviously well-known guy. The basic gist of what he said is that he wants to win a championship. That's what his focus and his goal is at this particular moment in his career. It is just simply that he said, I don't know whether that's going to be in Philly or anywhere else. Kind of where I want to start is here, and we'll get into the Harden stuff and just where this might be headed if he was just trolling or not. I have a really hard time, Chris, with superstars who even hint at stuff like this when their accolades do not back up the stature that they are taking on having by even the idea that they are in a place where they can put pressure on an organization. And obviously the Sixers will and should do everything they can to keep Joel Embiid happy. But like we laugh when KJ Martin or Furkan Korkmaz, like these are guys who have demanded trades, right? And we just laugh. We mock that. Joel Embiid is miles past what those guys are. But is he the caliber of player that can be kind of being so flippant about this as if everything should be about appeasing him when his own performance maybe doesn't back that up? Where do you fall with that kind of dynamic?
I think Joel Embiid has every right to exert himself whenever where he wants to. This is a guy that I think with supporting staff, coaching staff, whatever, he's an MVP. This is someone that absolutely can and should exert himself and his leverage however he can. This is someone who has a window and should be trying to make the most of it, whatever that looks like. I don't have any issue with like him in this way. He is at that level to me. I mean, this is one of the best, 5, 6, 7 players we have in the NBA. Just won the MVP, right? Like he's that good. I understand like there is some things that have not gone perfectly, but I don't have any concern with this.
So it's different. There's a difference between if it's like acceptable and whether it's if you're Daryl Morey, if you're Elton Brand, if you are Josh Harris, or I always think his name is Wolf Blitzer, but that's the CNN guy. There is somebody named Blitzer involved here who is a co-owner of this team. If you're those guys, what is implied by a trade demand like this is that the organization is failing you. Has the organization failed Joel Embiid?
Yes.
How has the organization failed Joel Embiid? Tell me that answer.
Okay. They paid Al Horford a ton of money. Okay. They picked Tobias Harris over Jimmy Butler, Brendan. Okay. They didn't trade Ben Simmons when they realistically should have got ahead of that. Like,
so you don't think that? Well, because the last one is the most important one, I think, right now because it's the most recent. If Joel Embiid wanted to demand a trade after the Jimmy Butler thing didn't go his way, I might have understood that more. I think right now you're at a situation where I just have a hard time feeling like Joel Embiid is some sort of wasted just blessing upon the Philadelphia 76ers that is going to be waved goodbye to unless they can kind of do whatever they can to satiate and satisfy him. Like, I think the Ben Simmons thing that you bring up, the most recent stuff, is a perfect example. Do you not think that they got a good trade? Because I think hindsight is pretty clouded here based on where we are now with the person who happened to come back in that Ben Simmons trade being the guy now who is kind of messing with it all. But I think at the time, February 2022, we all thought that was a pretty damn good trade. To get James Harden back for a dude who wasn't even playing?
All I'm saying is I think like this is built up to where like it is not optimal. And like it is a lot of, there is just like a lot on him to kind of figure some of this out. I think that is just like a real thing for me. Like I understand we can look at this and say, look, they did get a good trade back, and they got Harden, and that pick and roll between them is incredible. I just kind of think we're in a situation where, like, the organization, how it's been run throughout his career over multiple front offices, it's not like a perfect thing for him. Like, he should have, considering all the picks they've had, considering all the assets they've had, like, it just should probably be a little bit better than this, right? Like, I kind of think it should. And I'm not saying it needs to be overwhelmingly better, but I kind of just wonder if, like, it should be better than it is now. And he has a right to kind of wonder if it's just, especially because he just saw Jokic win the title for an organization that did a really great job of maximizing things around Jokic.
So I think Joel Embiid, let me give you his playoff numbers. Career. 24 points per game, 11 rebounds per game, 46% shooting from the field, 4 turnovers per game to just 3 assists, and where do we go with 3 fouls per game? Not that significant. And so let me put it to you this way. If he ends up on the Knicks, because that's just where people's minds are going to go with the agency connection and them kind of holding their chips for not Donovan Mitchell and whatever the bigger fish was eventually going to be. If you have a team of Jalen Brunson, Joel Embiid, and all their young role players, Julius Randle probably has to go out, so eliminate him. Is that a better situation for Joel Embiid? I think that's my point here is he's not at the level where he is the rising tide that lifts an organization to championship status. I'm not saying that a trade demand or any sort of pressure like that should only be reserved for the best of the best. I'm just saying it from the standpoint of if I'm a fan or if I'm a front office, like I would look at that and sort of say, well, what have you done for us lately if you're telling us we haven't done enough for you?
I just think he is that good. I just kind of do. I think that he's one of those guys.
What evidence is there that he's good enough to win a championship when he has never even played a game 1 of a conference finals? Like, I think that, I don't know. Like, I really do have questions about that. This is a guy who got roasted on the perimeter, switching out and trying to defend Jason Tatum, who, can't necessarily consistently create great shots for himself down the stretch of these games. I think he is one of the top 10 players in the NBA without a doubt. I guess to me, it's just the standard for something like this where I'm going to go over the top of the top in order to make somebody happy maybe is higher than top 10. Maybe it's top 3 or 5 for me.
All I will say on this, Brendan, is I think there's a really good chance that there's a world where Joel Embiid does just kind of break through, and then we just look at this and it's like, oh yeah, it just had to happen. Like I think the talent level's so high now. I think the circumstances in Philly have not always been perfect. I think Harden as your co-star is a really tough place to be. Even though as well as Harden has played, I just think that situation has been really tough, and it's not all kind of coalesced in a way. And I think that, considering where the league is at talent-wise, and also, look, he's had some mistakes. He's had some injury stuff. He's not infallible, but I think I just think he's too good for him not to be someone that you could really bank on in that way. I just think that highly of what Embiid is, and I don't think it's impossible, particularly in a world post-MVP where maybe he, the regular season is managed a little bit differently, where he is that guy that can get you 16 wins in the playoffs and gets the title. I really don't think that's something that's crazy to think. He could be the one that raises you up in that way.
Yeah, the health is a great point, too, in terms of you could look at it either way. It's why he's been held back, or it's a thing about him that's limiting to the team, whatever kind of direction you go. I obviously agree. Like, he is the embodiment of the process, right? He is why you're so bad for so long. You get a player like that. There's only, not even 100 players in the history of the NBA who have won an MVP trophy. That matters. That means something. That is important. And history tends to show those guys at least get to the finals, if not win it.
Look, Brendan, and again, I would just say to you the process part of it, let's just run. I just want to, again, run through the draft picks that came through the process. This is just like, for someone like Joel Embiid, and this has hurt him. Like, and it's not his fault. Like, this is something out of his control. Ben Simmons, okay, that we know what he is. Saric, there's a 12th overall pick. Michael Carter-Williams, 2013. One rookie of the year, but was clearly not that level. Nerlens Noel. Jahlil Okafor, who they took a year after they took Joel Embiid.
Yeah. And
Markelle
wasn't
Fultz.
playing yet then. Yeah.
Right. But you took I'm just just weird. And considering what we know about defense and center and projecting that forward, that picks a mistake. And then the Fultz thing, taking Fultz and not getting Tatum in that draft. There are just things that set him up to be in this spot that are not on him. There are, as good as he is, organization. I think we're in a point now with the league where it is really hard for players to overcome that kind of bot. So when the whole point was to have all these first round draft picks, that catches up to you at some point when you do mess them up. That's not fun to talk about. I'm sure if you asked him about it, he would look at you kind of weird about it. I just kind of think that's part of the story here to me.
Yeah, not great coaches either. You mentioned the Horford thing. You mentioned the Harris thing. There's been mistakes. There obviously have.
Even Doc Rivers as a coach, could have been better.
So let me ask you this, and we'll pivot to Harden here. To me, I guess a great way to put what I'm trying to say is I randomly, because I just was thinking about it the other day with this Embiid stuff, did my top 10 in the NBA personally. The top 3 guys on my list are the players who have led the past 3 champions. All right? I mean, it's Giannis, Jokic, and Steph. But it's kind of not important who it is or what order they're in. The point is, to me, Giannis won a championship with Chris Middleton as his second best player, or Drew Holiday, depending on what you say. Nikola Jokic won a championship with Jamal Murray as his second best player. And Steph Curry won a championship with Andrew Wiggins / Draymond Green as his second best player. Joel Embiid can't do that. To your point of the co-stars that he has lost and why that has been a detriment to his career, he is not the type of guy where you'll roll into next season feeling like Tyrese Maxey or whatever they're able to get back for Harden is good enough that you would say they're going to win a championship with that core, right? He needs a number 2. He needs a good number 3 maybe. And that's just a different caliber of player. Maybe I'm going too far to say that should limit him or subject him to a different type of standard for a trade demand or pressure or anything like that, but that's kind of what we're talking about here. So let's pivot to Harden. Daryl Morey told the radio station that if we can't get that, then we're not going to do it, that being basically a trade for picks that they can use to get a great player as a number 2 for Embiid or a player who will be that number 2 himself. To your point, they clearly see it as a necessity here. They don't think that they're going to build a deep sort of non-traditional championship contender where Embiid just makes everybody better. They seem to want another star. Makes sense. What's a realistic trade? Because it seems like he's all eyes on the Clippers. What would you be trying to get if you're Philly? And keep picks out of it. I guess that's just part of it no matter what. They don't have a lot of those. But is there a player or is there a player on a third team that you would be targeting that's realistically available that can kind of satisfy everybody's wishes here?
So to quote Harden's close personal friend, Lil Baby, it could get ugly. That's where I think we're at, Brendan. I don't think there's an obvious trade here. I don't think there's not a trade with the Clippers that I'm super thrilled about. They don't have the assets to do something else, to get a third guy to do something else. They could go after Dame and pursue that as a third team. That's been talked about. That's been speculated about. But if that costs you Maxey, is it really moving the needle for you in a significant way that really bolsters you and gives you that to me is a real thing there, right? I think that is a real concern in all of this. I don't think there is a trade right now, as we understand it, that is giving Philly what they want, that allows them to stay in contention or for a retool. And Brendan, the other part of this that I think is worth noting here is to bring this back to a place of Embiid, why would he be comfortable taking another gap year, so to speak? Why would he be comfortable being we're going to take care of you in a year? Why should he feel great about that? That's a really hard sell. I understand why that might be the logical way for Philly to build this out, but if you're Joel Embiid and you're clearly pushing, you clearly have one thing on your mind. You've won the MVP. Now it's time for a title. You're 29. You'll be 30 during next season. Your time is now. Are you going to be super comfortable giving Daryl the space and the time to really figure this out and flesh this out in a way that might be optimal for your title chances. But are you comfortable sitting through that? Like, there's a really hard path to walk here if you're Morey in the Philly brass. To me, I don't think there's an obvious deal here.
No, and we talked about, they're pivoting or sort of planning around cap space next summer, and like I do think
have you looked at the free agents next summer?
Well, we went through them, and there's a lot of guys with options and things like that could become available. Yeah, even if they're not right now.
So even that's just like we could. Okay, if just Pascal Siakam gets traded, like he's gonna probably sign an extension. Like, there's not names and things that I'm like, yeah, man, like you're just totally gonna make this a layup. Like it's
no.
Playing with Embiid would be appealing to me if I'm another great player, maybe a step below Embiid. But it's not like Philly's LA where it's just like the recruiting is gonna be super easy, or even New York theoretically, right? Like there's gonna have to be some really like stuff that breaks your way, I think, to get a little bit lucky here.
What if Philly got in on Siakam? Is that good enough?
What's the trade? I guess is the question.
I don't necessarily.
Is it costing you Maxey?
It's not that. Well, I mean, it would be like a 3-team construction with the Clippers. So could Terrence Mann go to Toronto? I just don't think the Sixers really have much need. Like Terrence Mann's been getting talked about a lot because he's just sort of like the best young player on the Clippers. I'm not really sure what he does for Philly. So, because between Maxey and Melton, it's like kind of there. I got my Terrence Mann type. So something centered on Mann as the centerpiece to the Raptors, and then picks and whatever else. My main question is that good enough for an Embiid trade? Because the point that Morey loves to make and that his kind of media buddies make for him now is he wants a star, right? And I think there's a part of him that is planning on that star can come in 2024. But to your point, is Embiid willing to wait long enough? That's kind of where we are right now. Can I walk through the Rockets thing when he traded Tracy McGrady, who was like cooked?
Yeah.
He traded Tracy McGrady, who, again, was basically, he never had another healthy season after he left Houston. So that's where we were with Tracy McGrady when Morey dealt him away. Yao Ming had deteriorated and kind of flamed out, and he was resetting the team. He got Kevin Martin and Jordan Hill back. Then eventually sent Jordan Hill as part of a cash dump to the Lakers at the trade deadline when they got Ramon Sessions during that like fake super team year for them. And the first-round pick that they got back with Fisher in that dump, paired with Kevin Martin, that was basically, I believe, what became the Jeremy Lamb pick, and Kevin Martin. And then I believe the Steven Adams pick was the last ingredient to get James Harden. So he pretty much turned Tracy McGrady and one first-round pick into James Harden. Like, we like to talk about it with the Simmons for Harden or the Chris Paul and Russell Westbrook and like all these different examples, or when he kind of, for a moment, we thought he might get Chris Bosh once upon a time when the Big Three was blowing up in Miami, and then he went back to, and Bosh went back to Miami. But this really is like what this dude's MO is. I kind of just feel like the league might have smartened up to it and are tired of getting beaten in deals by Daryl Morey, and I just don't think he has the leverage here. I kind of think neither side has a ton of leverage because Harden's just not a great appealing asset anymore. So Harden can't get the contract and situation that he wants, and Daryl Morey can't now get a trade he wants. Like it's all centered around that Harden's just not very desirable. So I don't know if that star player is going to come by way of Harden at all. I do think the best path is the cap space thing, and you just have to do the biggest sell job we've ever seen to keep Joel Embiid happy. But that brings us to the last point here. We called it Slop of the Week for a reason. Joel Embiid has taken to Twitter to tell us that he is trolling. Was he kidding?
No. Like, no. We're not in the era where guys stick around forever anymore. We're just not. That's okay. But
so you think he chose a closed door movie festival to deliver this? That's part of why I do think he may have been kind of facetious or dropping breadcrumbs or just kind of trying to like test pilot this out, but not actually
that's
say
what
it?
this is. That's what this is. This is like a pretty innocuous comment that not true. That is true, right? Like that's how I view this. I'm not saying that this is something to me that is both true and in the moment kind of innocuous, but like it's not like it's not true. Like
So
he
maybe
wants to win a
let it
title.
slip and then had to kind of do damage control.
Yeah. And also, like, I'm sorry, like, this is also a weird thing where it took, like, 4 days for people to find out about this.
Yeah.
And also
maybe that's
just, like,
why he let it slip, because it was closed door.
Yeah. I'm sorry, like, we're not in an era where anyone is happy in one place forever unless you're, like, Nikola Jokic. Like, that's the one guy that I kind of suspect might just be happy in one place forever. No one is ever, we're not in, like, any superstar movement now. It's just something that I think can and will and is possible to happen. Like Tim, like I don't know if we're Brendan. Like this is like a bigger conversation, but like I don't know how to project like who would be like the person most likely to be the next like Duncan that just sticks around in an organization for his entire career in that way. Like Dwayne
There's
Wade
a
left
lot
Miami.
more than you would think, though. I mean, like I guess at the very end like that, but people are going to remember Dwayne Wade as a member of the Miami Heat. Like he stayed there long enough to count in my book. But, I mean, like, we always think it's the whole, like, LeBron moving, KD moving made us all feel like it was never going to happen. But, like, Devin Booker's been on his team his whole career. Bam Adebayo doesn't seem like he's going anywhere. Jokic, Murray,
Booker would be
both.
the one. Booker and Jokic are the two. But then, like,
Giannis,
is
maybe.
there...
I mean, we don't know. Giannis could stay. He's never said anything about leaving. It's just everybody else can't shut up about it.
Sure. It just feels like we're in a different moment to me.
Yeah. Yeah, I'll be interested to see what teams line up for Embiid and kind of what might happen if it does.
Okay.
I don't know if it'll be this offseason. It'll be a lot to see, but I am genuinely curious what type of second-best player it will take to get him there. And I don't think it's as easy as put him somewhere new and it'll just be fixed because the Sixers are such a nightmare. Like, I don't think that's the issue here. I do think there are some fundamental concerns with Embiid.
Let me reframe what I said real quick. I want to ask you a question to kind of reframe this. Dame, are we in a world where someone will be like Dame and wait until they're 33 before really looking to go elsewhere?
Yeah. I think like all of that is way more normal than we kind of make it out to be. Like Kareem Abdul-Jabbar changed teams. You know, like there's plenty of great players who have ended up in different situations as they aged. You know, some of it was like the ABA and NBA crap, but like Kobe wanted to go to the Bulls. You know, like I think people wanted to make LeBron some sort of like harbinger of the death of the league and stuff because we got mad about the Boys and Girls Club crap. It's just like this has always been a thing. So I think it's always been a thing that people want to move. I think it's always been a thing that people stay. And I think that status quo will remain.
All right, social media is working my brain. Let's move on to the next thing.
Extension matchmaker, as well as to extend or not to extend. So we're playing two games at once here regarding the players left in the extension market who have until, I believe it's still October 31st. I don't think this changed under the new collective bargaining agreement. Who are not max guys because those players are already out of the way. Those players have already signed their new contracts, LaMelo Ball and everybody else that we've spent time talking about here on the show. So I have 6 names that I think are the most interesting and most kind of on the fringe. I guess all of these players are on the fringe. We also did already see Isaiah Stewart get a contract that's not a max, and we did already see Tyrese Maxey, who we've already been talking about. Daryl Morey has basically come out and said, or at least it's been intimated, that they're not extending Maxey this year, partially to maintain their max cap space next summer. So the 6 names I have, we'll go one by one, and you're going to tell me, Chris, will they be extended before this deadline? And then we're going to compare them to last year's extension players, guys like Jordan Poole, Brandon Clark, Keldon Johnson, and we're going to pick which of the deals they're going to be closest to. All right. Do the rules of engagement make sense to the audience that we can't see or hear?
Yes, chef.
Okay. Let's start with my guy. Australia by way of Tucson's own. Or Tucson by way of Australia, I don't know.
Yeah,
Josh Green.
Yeah, I think it's the latter.
Josh Green, wing for the Dallas Mavericks, had a little bit of a breakout season last year, but the shot came and went, and as it did, so did his playing time. Not sure if Jason Kidd fully believes in this dude. Seems like the front office does, considering he's still on the team. Does Josh Green get an extension from the Dallas Mavericks by November 1st?
I would say yes. I think this is a team that already has Luka when this again making 43 and Kyrie making an estimated 40. They're kind of in a spot where like they're not really going to be a cap space team as far as like me looking at the cap would go. Like they'll have a little bit of room under the tax, but like you'll have to, like what happens with Rashawn Holmes and JaVale McGee. Like there's ways to kind of duck under that and figure it out and operate in a cost controlled way. So I would say I think he's an obvious yes. I think this is someone they need to keep and need to prioritize if I'm them.
This was a hard one to peg. I agree. I think it will get done. I think that even if they don't see him as a core part of the team long term for whatever reason, if for no other reason than kind of keeping him on and contributing now, but maintaining him as a trade piece, if you do want to shoot bigger in the future, they kind of have to do this. But there's not an obvious comp from last year when you look at it.
I would give him the RJ Barrett contract and feel pretty good about it.
Really?
Yeah. And somewhere between the Hunter and Barrett contracts, I would feel pretty good about.
So that's between 4 years, $90 million, 4 years, $107 million.
Yeah. I don't think that's crazy. I like him as a player going forward more than I do DeAndre Hunter.
I see it closer to the Keldon Johnson, Kevin Porter Jr. range, simply for this reason is Barrett and Hunter were both top 10 picks. And like that just lingers. Like once you get that stamp of approval, your agent is able to run that into the ground. Like you're forever and always a top 10 pick. And that will be on the first page of the slide deck when they're making their pitch to the ownership to give you your bag. And Josh Green was a late first, similar to Keldon. Kevin Porter is a unique situation, but Keldon Johnson was also kind of a late first round pick. So that's the only reason. And so maybe, something like 4 years, $70 million might be my guess.
I think that's reasonable. It's also just this exercise to me is funny because I'm looking at what Jordan Poole got, which is the most, and that's the contract I feel worst about out of these extensions. And there's guys that I like aren't going to get as much as him that I kind of would like better the next couple of years than him. Is the weird part about this. I think you're right about the lottery pick, the top 10 pick of this gives you some rub that I think would benefit you.
So let's move on then to what I think of as maybe the most similar. It's not a one-to-one, but the through line with the top three guys that all got their deals sort of later in the offseason last summer between Poole, Hero, and Barrett was they're all, in theory or in practice, like they can get buckets, right? And that is the other thing, aside from being a top 10 pick that tends to go a pretty long way. Let's go to Devin Vassell.
Okay. Love him.
Last season, per 36 minutes, 22 points, 4 rebounds, 4 assists, shot 44% from the field, not great, but 39% from 3, and was just a little weighed down by only 48% from 2 and the fact that he just took so many threes, but still a very efficient overall player, somebody who makes his free throws, creates turnovers defensively, and is still, like all these guys, pretty young. He's about to turn 23 after a one-and-done year at Florida State. So where are we here? Is he getting more than Jordan Poole? Is he gonna be a high watermark, or are we talking somewhere in the middle here?
Brendan, of the guys on this list, he would be the one that I think has the. Let me put it this way: I think besides another name we're going to talk about, besides Jaden McDaniels, I think this is the guy I would almost think maybe has the best chance to make an all-star game of guys on the list. I love Devin Vassell. Mm-hmm. I think this is someone that has the chance to really grow as a creator, as an on-ball guy. And if you're San Antonio, you should bet on him I think I would be betting on him being someone that's really going to grow for you, that is really going to elevate around Victor Wembanyama with you and be part of your core. Like this is someone that I think is really going to keep growing and growing and growing, and is still really young, as you pointed out. Him getting up to the pool number would be interesting. That still feels like a lot. I would say this does get done. I think it would benefit both sides, but is it somewhere? Is it between Barrett and Hero? Is it up to the 123 number? What this looks like to me is kind of a mystery, because I think you could convince me it's worth it to go all in just because of what the projection outward for him should be.
Yeah, it's an interesting track record for the Spurs. I would think this has to get done. I think it would just be a weird sign to not. They have tended to extend their players, but just the recent track record during their rebuild is they just didn't end up keeping a lot of them because they were bad for long enough that they kind of just kept rolling it over. So Derek White gets 4 years, like 72, I believe, something in that neighborhood. And now he's in Boston, obviously. They do extend Keldon Johnson, who we referenced from last year, 4 for $80. And then DeJounte Murray got a really below-market deal, like 4 for $64. So they've tended to get pretty team-friendly deals. I know some people think that Keldon Johnson thing is an overpay, but it's really not. It's not that horrendous.
That's a good price for a pretty good 3-4 rotation piece, who I think should still probably get a little bit better.
Somebody who had like the lowest figures to be like a top 7 rotation guy on a good team, like that's how much those guys make, unless they're on their rookie contract or some sort of like older veteran, like that's the price. So I don't think of that as an overpay. So it makes me think that San Antonio maybe gets this locked in for less than we're expecting. He has to make more than Keldon, just from like an optics standpoint, right? Like he can't make less than Keldon Johnson. He has to make more because he's just better and more promising and more accomplished at a similar age. I know he didn't get to go to Tokyo with Pop like Keldon did, but so I would probably put this just above the DeAndre Hunter number. Maybe 4 years, 100. Jaylen Brown got that once upon a time, I think. 4 years, like 102, I think is what Brown got on his second contract. I think something like that.
I think that's more than reasonable. I would be pretty happy with that, I think, if on both sides.
All right, let's go to Jaden McDaniels, who you mentioned a second ago. I think this dude's upside is immense.
Oh, yeah.
I think what's been standing in the way of Jaden McDaniels, frankly, is just having a system and an infrastructure and a stable set of encouraging kind of positive, you're as good as you think you are types of people. I watched this dude in person at Washington, and it left a very strong mark of just how lax he looked, and it couldn't be further from how he looks now, and that makes me feel like the sky is sort of the limit, that he's going to keep getting better if he can continue to be in an environment where he can thrive.
Also didn't help him that he punched a wall before the playoffs, and we didn't get to see him on that stage.
Yeah, for sure, and dumb mistake, but I don't think that probably will hold them back from wanting to pay him. There was a big John Krasinski feature in The Athletic about how much they are just like over the moon about his potential and everything. This feels like a dude who could return like max player value by the end of his first contract to me. But I don't know if his agent and him can like get that right now. So maybe
RJ Barrett deal?
Yeah. I think that's a great blueprint because it's a similar type of situation where it's a little forward looking, a little bit of a raw player, but somebody on a good team who you kind of want to keep happy and continue to develop.
I think that or like a carbon copy like the Hero deal to me would make a lot of sense. And especially because he is at this premium position. This is a big wing who can handle, who's going to be really like fit really well with what Ant is, right? Like everything the Wolves are going to do should be about what Ant is and what he's going to be and projecting that forward and building around that guy because he's a freaking monster.
And that as a wing tandem,
like
those two guys locked up for the next 5 years, like Jesus.
And then whatever you trade Towns for, you're cooking with gas.
Well, that's the thing too, right? In terms of will it happen, is like this is another team that's pretty much capped out and already kind of staring down the second apron, which is not something that I think that any professional sports team in Minnesota would like to be doing. So, they're going to probably trade Towns eventually, but they can't be in the business of pissing off premium young talent and causing any problems. You got to just retain him and figure out the financial stuff later.
Bingo. Give him the hero deal, and I would not bat an eye one bit.
Onyeka Okongwu, interesting one. Because there is still not a path to starting for him. They have been trying to trade the guy in front of him for multiple years. That, of course, is Clint Capella. There are numerous young players on this roster, none of which play center, obviously, and you could even say Onyeka Okongwu is not a tailor-made center, but that's what he is in the modern NBA. All of that is to say it's an interesting fit. It is an interesting point in time to be making this decision. I gotta say, Chris, this is one I feel like maybe doesn't happen.
I agree with you because I think the lack of clarity with Capella, the lack of clear just putting him in as your starter, I think that complicates this. And this is also an organization that has the history of being very tight with their money to some degree, right? This isn't a team that has always thrown the bag around, and if they haven't, Hunter's still around, if they still have Capella's deal on the books, if they just signed DeJounte Murray to this extension, I think that could complicate this. And if you're a Okongwu, I kind of think I would probably not lock myself into anything right now. And why would the Hawks offer you anything less than something that I think is probably below what he's worth if he's going to be a starter? The Hawks' goal here is going to be get him, if you can get him extended at a number that is below starting center caliber deal. If you could get him below what Jared Allen got in Cleveland at 20 per, or below what Capella's last deal is, you're going to do it because that's going to be really good value for you as the cap goes up and as he, I think, probably goes into starter money. But if you're a Okongwu, even if we don't have this world where he could go out and look, all it takes is one team. If he hits RFA, and there's one team that can just give him a big deal, he should pursue that more than just locking himself into something that is going to pay him below what he's going to be as a pretty good starting center once he actually gets an opportunity.
Well, and the kind of gross part of this, right, as the team that sometimes benefits them is by way of blocking his path to heavy minutes or seeing what he is as a starting center. Other teams also have not seen that. And so there is a little bit of leverage that you're able to have there where it's it's not on film. Another team is also projecting, and you know the most about your player, right? So it is weird, and it does feel like one that's maybe headed toward a little grossness. And I also think too, centers and bigs tend to be the guys that kind of end up in no man's land from a contract standpoint a lot of the time. DeAndre Ayton, Lauri Markkanen, PJ Washington still, who we could have included in this even though he's eligible for a restricted offer and didn't get an extension last year. He's 1 year older than all these guys, but that type of player tends to be the one. And if I'm the team, I'm probably looking at Brandon Clark to play a matchmaker here. But he got a contract that's barely over what the mid-level is now. If I'm Onyeka Okongwu, I'm not taking that. I'd rather roll the dice. The last part of this that factors into me, Chris, is if they get Pascal Siakam, which they're apparently still trying to do, it feels like that just locks it into place. One, that the extension for him is not coming, and two, that he might not be on the team next year. Next summer, there might be a sign and trade or just them not matching.
Yeah, or I know Toronto just paid Pirtle, but I would be trying to finagle him out of Atlanta if at all possible.
Maybe he's part of the trade, exactly.
And I would rather be paying Okongwu. And look, I would, Brendan, if you told me today, I would just for the record, that he was going to get more than what Brandon Clark got, I would feel very good about that. I think I would rather, even independent of the Clark injury situation, and we'll see how he comes back, I just kind of think I'm a big Okongwu guy. I think that guy is a defensive savant, even, maybe not being the towering monster defensively you might want, but I think that guy's awesome, and I would feel really good about his next contract within a certain realm. But if he got 4, he's not going to get it right now. But if he got 4, if he got the Keldon Johnson, I'd be that's fantastic. That's great.
Which is similar to the Jared Allen one that you mentioned.
Yeah. Jared got a flat 20 per year over 5. He got 100 over 5, and that's kind of starting pretty competent starting center caliber money right now.
Yeah, it is for sure. I mean, that was Pirtle's baseline and everything else, right? And Vucevic and guys like that. I do just think the question is he a center full-time? In a league where Joel Embiid is out there, Nikola Jokic is out there, Giannis is out there, Bam is out there. I think, some of those guys he matches up with better than others, but he's probably not your only answer at the 5 if you're a championship team. You probably have him or him with a bunch of other big for their position types. It's not like he's just sort of plug and play as an all-star center to defend and play against every type of guy.
Now I really want the Toronto thing because him and Pirtle would whip. Like, Pirtle could handle the bruising and some of that stuff, and he could play the 4.
Or maybe it's, long-term, Okongwu, Barnes, Siakam, Anunoby, I meant to say, and whatever guards and wings they put together around that. Like, yeah. What they thought they were getting in Precious a little bit,
Yeah, Precious, but, like, much higher ceiling.
And bigger and more athletic and everything. Yeah. Yeah, it's an interesting one. Precious also available for an extension, but we've talked about him in the past Raptors segment, so I didn't include him. Last one, Immanuel Quickley. There's already been numbers out there, I believe, starting somewhere in the neighborhood of $20 million. That's been thrown out there by Mike Scotto, I believe, of Hoops Hype, that they're kind of prepared to pay him that realm of money. A lot of that, back to the premium skill set of bucket getting, relies on how believable and buyable was what he did in the regular season from a shot creation standpoint versus what he looked like in the playoffs, or frankly, some of the points earlier in his career where he felt more just like a 3-and-D kind of guard. Is the ability to create for himself real or not? And unfortunately, they don't have more games to look at between now and when they have to make the decision. So it is a pretty tough one just because it's been so up and down for him.
Well, yeah, where I would have pause with him is in a series where they were pretty much the dominant team throughout against Cleveland. He was not a really big part of that. He was not someone that felt like he was a part of that series in a meaningful way. That would give me some pause. That became the Jalen Brunson show, right? Like, that became Jalen Brunson is doing Jalen Brunson things, and like, why would you think it's going to be different? Now, like, you can also look at, like, he had that game against Boston. He had, like, a fantastic regular season and did take on really big moments when Brunson was out. But the playoffs would give me some pause. Guard prices would give me some pause just because I think you can – that's another area where I think teams will try to say – I think we're going to see a world where in addition to center, teams do maybe try to squeeze the market on guards a little bit just because there are a lot of them right now. Mm-hmm. Even if you like your guy, I think that could be a spot where you do squeeze a little bit. 20 to me doesn't feel unreasonable. I mean, that's significantly less than what Jordan Poole and Tyler Hero got, and I don't think he's not super far away from those guys to me, right? Mm-hmm. Like, I don't think it's like I would take Hero of those 3. That would be the one I think is the best player right now.
Yeah,
but like,
don't say that to Joe Cronin, by the way. Don't let him hear you say that. Tyler
okay,
Hero's
sure.
trash.
Yeah, okay. Tyler Hero's going to get somewhere good, and like put whatever team he puts back into social media is just going to like have like a pretty good player. But like, is he like whatever he? Let's say it is 20. Like, is he X number of dollars like worse than Jordan Poole? Like, the answer is no. Like, he is not like this significantly worse guy than what Jordan Poole got last year.
Well, again, it goes back to is he somebody who can create his shot at all at the highest levels in playoff games, in a starting role, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know. I just straight up, I don't know. I mean, I tend to lean no. I think I am a little bit lower on him just from kind of physically the way that he plays. I don't anticipate that he's a player who's ever going to be a great like layup and dunk creator for himself. He's not going to overpower or speed past guys to get the best shots on the court consistently for himself or free throws. And so you're talking about pull-up jumpers, transition, spot up, playing off of guys as like the 3rd or 4th best player on a team is kind of how I think of him. Even if he is a pretty great point of attack defender with the size to defend bigger guys too, what is that? And to your point about guards, not only is it a position that could get squeezed and is very well represented like in the league period, it's also well represented on this team. They already paid RJ Barrett, who may or may not be a guard depending on how you see him. Jalen Brunson is here for as long as they can possibly keep him here. They just signed Dante DiVincenzo, and they have Quentin Grimes and Miles McBride coming up behind them. And I think Grimes to me has a higher ceiling than than Quickley, provided that Grimes' jump shot can continue to develop. I think the other stuff he brings is a little harder to replace. So that would all be swirling around to me. But the fact that there's already kind of smoke around them paying him makes me think I think they probably just do it. But that's also because they want to make a trade. And they don't care about having a bunch of salaries that they can eventually send out for Joel Embiid or Giannis or whatever. We know that's the Knicks' end game, so maybe that's why they do it.
And 20 is a pretty tradable salary. 20 is like a very, especially with the cap going up, which you will hear us say in any other NBA podcast you'll listen to say a bajillion times the next 5 seasons. The cap is going to go up, and something like you lock in at $20 million. That's going to be like a drop in the proverbial bucket of the NBA cap. That's like a relative bargain. That's like going to be pretty close to mid-level in a way that's going to be really weird to grapple with.
Yeah, by the end of this CBA, the mid-level will be close to 20, I would think, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know about all the parts of it, but it's supposed to go up 10% basically every year from here on out, or it may be a little less in the non-TV years, but once we get to the TV deal, the cap will be going up 10% a year, and that's faster than salaries are allowed to expand. I know everybody, like you said, has been making that point, but yeah, 20 already is basically top 7 rotation guy money, and soon it might even be less than that. The money's about to get insane. What was your question?
So the name that we didn't get to is his former teammate, Obi Toppin.
Yeah.
Can I just predict that I'm going to say no just because if I'm Indiana, I would kind of want to like see how Rick Carlisle feels about him before I spend money on him.
Yeah, that's fair. There is always like the what was talked about before the trade and what wasn't and everything else. Part of me wonders, though, it's like, why not try it now before you really kind of like let him rip? And that's like me siding with the team, which I don't always love to do. But like, if I am an executive in Indiana, part of me is like, could I get him for kind of what he is now? And then as he's about to break out and, you know, then it'll be a bargain. I would at least have the conversation with him, you know?
Sure. Yeah. Just curious. I do think he's going to look awesome catching lobs from Tyrese Halliburton, though. So take that for what you will.
Yeah, interested to see if he can play the 5 at all. Interested to see if he can make more than just corner threes, or even if he could do that consistently. There's a lot there, but he isn't much of anything yet because he didn't really get an opportunity. So we'll have to see where that all goes. But yes, that is the last of it. There's a lot of other guys. Cole Anthony is an interesting one. Zeke Naji in Denver is sort of interesting. Killian Hayes,
there's
a lot
of
is going to be getting a deal here, but Poku.
Well, it's like that draft class is like in retrospect just kind of like a really weird one. That 2020, it's the COVID class obviously, so there's like some weirdness in there. But like you have Patrick Williams, you have Isaac Okoro, both top 5 picks who I don't think are getting extended.
Yeah.
Killian Hayes, Denny Avdia. You mentioned Cole Anthony, Sadiq Bey, Naji. You mentioned
a lot of guys who are already bench players. Yes. You know what I mean? That's
like have already
feels
squeezed.
Interesting for 3 years in, for there to already be this many players where it's like their ceiling is a bench guy.
Yeah, we kind of like know what a bunch of these guys are, and then like you get into like the like Paul Reed case who already like sent an offer sheet and is going to be back in Philly, and like it's a weird class in retrospect. And like a lot of these guys are kind of in weird financial spots. Like if like, and you even just think about it, like Patrick Williams is still somehow only 21. And it's like, oh, like it's weird. Like,
yeah,
it's
that's
weird.
An interesting one. We should have done that one, but maybe we can. Well, if he does or doesn't, we'll obviously still be here to talk about it. But
Brendan, in August we should just do a Bulls episode because like I need to figure out what the Bulls are, and like I just would like to talk through that.
I don't think doing an episode would help us figure out what they are.
Well, but you know what? Would it be entertaining? Maybe.
Judging from the numbers that our clip about the Bulls did, I feel like even Bulls fans might not want to hear that episode, though, unfortunately.
Look, okay, but having talked to our friend Ricky O'Donnell over the years about the Bulls, every time I talk about the Bulls, it's like a little bit angsty and a little bit just like maybe just one move will help them figure this out.
He did a deep breakdown of the Freeman Liberty kid that they brought to Summer League and posted like a highlight reel to Twitter, so it's bleak.
I love Ricky. I love Ricky so much. That's I didn't put that much effort into thinking about the Summer League champions, the Cleveland Cavaliers. So,
well, Ricky's the lead editor at SB Nation, and you and I are doing a podcast. So I mean,
hey,
winner. You got to break down. You got to grind.
Brendan, I feel like I should have asked you about one thing too before we get out of here. I just need your comment on this. The Matt Ishbia era, they now have a G League team that's coming as soon as next season. How does it feel to be covering a team primarily that now is doing like the competent NBA thing, would just spend money on a G League team?
The far more interesting and funny conversation is that they sold theirs 3 years ago, which I've always just wondered,
yes.
I've always just wondered, what the hell did that mean?
Taxes, baby. That's just rich guy taxes stuff right there. That's what that is.
That's the best explanation that I can come up with, because it's not exactly expensive or prohibitively costly to start one. There's no need to buy it. They didn't get the arena in the deal or anything like that. They hired their own staff. So like, what does selling a G League team even mean in practice? The team changed names. It's not playing in the same place. Nothing carried over. It was just, yes, you're probably right. Financial and tax-related things that rich folks love.
That's accounting, brother. That is accounting. That's what that feels like.
Well, congrats to the since beleaguered and embarrassed and just embittered former owner of the Phoenix Suns, Robert Sarver, who I detailed at SB Nation. Look at that, full circle. Read that piece about Arizona and the Suns and Phoenix and everything. But that'll wrap us up. Hit follow or subscribe wherever you're listening to the Just Basketball Show. We're on YouTube as well as every audio platform. Follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all of those good places. Threads, we're at all of them. We're posting on all of them. And we hope you find us there. Thank you to Dillon Heiser and Jake Stevens for their production help. And we will catch all of you guys next week.